赶紧回到自己的座位上，谢谢大家。
Hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch.
大家午安 Good afternoon. I've heard that sometimes artificial intelligence can be very challenging to work with.
What do you mean by challenging?
Well, I think nowadays AI is kind of like lack of ethical training. So I think if we could expose the AI more to Buddhist teachings, how about that? Will that change the current situation?
Quite right. Perhaps the next panel of scholars can give us some insights into this. Next, we begin our second panel, AI and Buddhist ethics. This panel asks how Buddhist ethics can be applied to understand and regulate AI. This panel is moderated by Dr. Suan Lin, Assistant Professor in the Department of Religious Studies at Furen Catholic University.
现在让我们将进入下一个议场之前，我大概说一下，也就是我们接下来就要来讨论人工智能与佛教伦理这个议题，我们将邀请4位学者为我们来谈谈这个议题，请掌声欢迎我们第2场议场主持人，辅仁大学林树安教授。
Good afternoon, everyone. I think after one panel, everyone may have a lot of thoughts would like to discuss more. So I wouldn't say more things. So let's welcome the first panelist, Professor Everett Thompson. He's teaching at the University of British Columbia with a research focus on Buddhist and Western philosophy of mind and cognitive science. Let's welcome Professor Thompson.
This one. 大家好，我一点紧张，那么多人。I always get a little nervous in very big lecture halls with lots of very impressive people. My title is An Active Intuition and the Blind Spot of AI. And my starting point is what the Japanese Zen Buddhist philosopher Nishida Kitaro called enactive intuition, Shinwei de Zhiguan. Intuition means direct experience, awareness before or beyond the split between subject and object. In his early works, Nishida used the term pure experience, which he took from William James. Pure experience is the basic form of experience before or beyond the subject-object dichotomy. Enactive means characterized by action in contrast to passive reception. Enactive intuition, I just want to position this right. Enactive intuition means characterized by action in contrast to passive reception. Enactive intuition, a term from Nishida's later writings, means that pure experience is not passive or disembodied. To be aware is already to act through our bodies and to bring forth a world while being formed by the world. Body and world for Nishida always have historical being, so pure experience, enactive intuition, arises within our concrete historical situation, both forming and formed by it. As Nishida wrote in 1936, that which I call the world of direct or pure experience, I have now come to think of as the world of historical reality. The world of enactive intuition, the world of poesis, is none other than the world of pure experience. Poesis is the Greek word for something made or produced, from which we get the English word poetry. Art exemplifies enactive intuition because intuition entails action, and action entails intuition in artistic creation. Nishida argues that the same is true of science. Scientific observation and experimentation require that we intuit and act with and through our bodies and special instruments in a community of investigators. Enactive intuition is the wellspring, the source of science. Our modern scientific worldview, however, is based on forgetting that enactive intuition is the source of science. By modern scientific worldview, I mean the philosophical perspective that got attached to modern science beginning in the 17th century and continuing down to our time. That philosophical perspective comes from European natural philosophy. It takes the mathematizable properties of physics to be what is fundamentally real, not the world as we experience it. We see color, for example, and experience sensations of hot and cold, but electromagnetic radiation and the average kinetic energy of molecules and atoms are said to be what is fundamentally real, not what we experience. Even though color has obvious biological and psychological value, and we could not have constructed thermometry, the science of temperature or the measurement of temperature, and thermodynamics without relying on our sensations of hot and cold, our bodily experience. Similarly, we experience duration and the passage of time with its ever-renewing now, but time as measured by a clock is said to be physically real time. According to this way of thinking, which Alfred North Whitehead called the bifurcation of nature, nature at an instant is more fundamental than nature as process, magnitudes are more fundamental than qualities, computation is more fundamental than meaning, and information is more fundamental than mind. This philosophical worldview is built on a deep amnesia forgetting of experience, a forgetting of enactive intuition, because the abstract models and constructs of mathematical science actually presuppose and depend on our lived experience for their meaning and intelligibility. For example, a physical clock measures a succession of moments, but only experiencing duration allows us to recognize this as a succession. Clocks don't measure time, we do. Without our enactive intuition of time, clock time, as physics defines it, is unintelligible. The idea that lived experience is a necessary condition of science is the central thesis of my recent book, The Blind Spot: Why Science Cannot Ignore Human Experience, co-written with the physicists Adam Frank and Marcelo Gleiser. We argue that at the heart of science lies something we do not see that makes science possible, just as the blind spot lies at the heart of our visual field and makes seeing possible. In the visual blind spot sits the optic nerve. In the scientific blind spot sits direct experience. Nowhere is the scientific blind spot more present than in AI. Thinking that the mind is essentially a computer has given rise to intractable problems, visible especially in current AI. The problems center on meaning and understanding, particularly on how we realize relevance. Relevance realization, and this has a double meaning in English, because in English, to realize means to understand, but it also means to embody. So relevance realization, in that dual sense, is the process of being able to decide what matters in any given situation. Consider taking notes during a lecture. You have to zero in on what is relevant and know how to ignore what is irrelevant. You need to be able to follow a train of thought and extract its meaning, its main ideas, while making connections to other things you know. If you ask questions, whether to get more detail, clear up a misunderstanding, or bring out and explore presuppositions or implications of what is being said, you also have to be able to discern what is relevant. Furthermore, this whole activity is shaped and guided by norms, by values, by standards of how you should think and speak, social standards of good behavior, common sense standards of good judgment. All of this is crucial for relevance realization. The standard computational approach to relevance realization is to try to turn it into another form of problem solving, one that relies on heuristics, that is, makeshift and imperfect solutions instead of algorithms, step-by-step procedures guaranteed to give you a certain result. But this approach to relevance realization just kicks the can down the road, because you already need to have distinguished relevance in order to know which heuristics are the relevant ones to apply in any given situation. This vicious circle suggests that relevance realization cannot be reduced to an algorithmic or heuristic process, or to put it another way, that relevance realization is not completely formalizable. Instead, relevance realization is built on having or being a body and experiencing the world through perception and action. In other words, relevance realization requires an active intuition, which is not likely to be completely formalizable in a computational framework. Nevertheless, projecting a capacity for intuition onto AI is widespread in the hype surrounding AI technology. Consider AlphaGo, the deep learning Go playing program that defeated world champion Lee Sedol in 2016, or its more powerful successor program, AlphaGo Zero. Commentators claimed that these programs replicated or captured human intuition about Go positions and moves. Intuition, according to this perspective, is just a matter of computation. What Go players, based on their subjective experience, call intuition is really just neural computations, which are subjectively inscrutable to the players themselves. The experience of intuition is an after-the-fact side effect, a subjective epiphenomenon of brain computations, according to this way of thinking. We've now arrived at the blind spot. AlphaGo does not replicate or capture human intuition, and it does not realize relevance because it knows nothing about Go as a game. AlphaGo excels at detecting patterns that we know are Go board positions, but it does not know that its data structures represent Go positions and moves. AlphaGo does not know that it is evaluating Go moves. Indeed, it does not know that it is playing Go at all. We understand its behavior as being about Go, a game that exists in the world outside its data structures. But AlphaGo has no knowledge of there being an outside world, let alone one with games. So AlphaGo does not replicate or capture intuition. Rather, its pattern detection performance, as interpreted by us from the outside, models aspects of human Go playing intuition by simulating them. AlphaGo and deep learning neural networks in general provide no evidence that intuition is epiphenomenal. On the contrary, the experience of intuition is how we should expect a highly skilled embodied agent's perception to be organized so as to be efficacious for action in the real world. Suppose we were to create an artificial embodied expert Go player that did know that it was playing Go. To have this kind of knowledge, it would have to know and understand numerous things about the world, including understanding itself as an agent in the Go playing community and the world at large. We should expect that its deep inner workings would be subjectively inscrutable to it, precisely because it would be oriented to the world and not to its own internal workings. When you play Go, you're not aware of your neuron firings, you're aware of the positions and moves and the other player. We should expect that it would perceive Go positions by intuiting them as having good shapes, and that its intuitive mode of perception would be a causally efficacious way for its cognition to be organized in relation to the world. Without being organized for intuition, it would not be able to realize relevance, not just in the well-defined micro-domain of Go, but also in the ill-defined world at large. Despite AI hype, no AI system comes close to realizing relevance, and no historical or current AI approaches come anywhere near being able to create systems that understand meaning, have general intelligence, or manifest even minimal common sense. Consider so-called face recognition systems. Despite the name, they do not, properly speaking, recognize faces. Instead, they learn mappings between digital images of faces and token labels of the people who have those faces. We humans know that these token labels are proper names. We know to whom the labels refer, and we recognize that the image is a picture of the person they name, but the AI has no such knowledge. Similarly, large language models consist of complex statistical models of how the token labels in their huge amounts of training data correlate. But no amount of statistical prediction, no matter how robust and how large the data set, is sufficient for causal knowledge of how the outside world works. For example, imagine seeing a sequence of lights on the wall, green, yellow, red, green, yellow, red. Given these observations, you may successfully predict the next color, green. The capacity to make this prediction, a form of statistical inference, is distinct from the capacity to understand what generates the sequence or what would change it. For example, knowing that it's made by the traffic light outside, without which it would not occur. Evidence from developmental psychology suggests that the human capacity to appreciate this type of dependency, to have a generative concept of cause, develops from our experience of our own and others' goal-directed actions. Human learning occurs through active participation in world affairs by making the differences that we need and want to make in our lives as social biological beings. Our causal knowledge comes from being able to perceive and act, and from understanding the contingencies between actions and outcomes. LLMs, large language models, have no such abilities. They have no conceptual understanding of the outside world because they have no real-world experience. Just as AlphaGo does not know anything about Go as a game, and facial image detection systems have no knowledge that their data structures pertain to images of faces, let alone people, real people who exist in the world, ChatGPT has no knowledge of how the world works. In these respects, LLMs and face detection systems are not that much different from a map or an abacus. The map doesn't know the way home, and the abacus is not clever at arithmetic. It takes knowledge to devise and use such models, but the models themselves have no knowledge, not because they're ignorant, but because they are models, that is to say, tools. They don't navigate or calculate, nor do they have destinations to reach or debts to pay. We human beings use them for these knowledge purposes. LLMs have more in common with the map or abacus than with the people who design and use them as tools. It is the tool creator and user, not the tool, who has knowledge. Another similarity between tools like maps and deep learning systems, deep learning AI systems, is that they tend to be inherently biased. For example, facial image detection systems have tended to be more accurate on images of white male faces than on images of female or non-white faces. They have classified Asian faces as blinking and mist faces with dark skin, or in one notorious case, tagged a selfie of two African Americans as gorillas. Last month, the Washington Post asked 3 AI image generating tools to show a beautiful woman, and all 3 tools generated thin women with light skin tones. The tools wouldn't produce images of full-size women or an average body type unless the offensive word fat was used as a prompt, and even then, many of the images were of women with impossibly small waists. Many other biases could be detected in the responses to the prompts. Besides sorting input into biased and loaded categories, such as racial, gender, and body stereotypes, deep learning systems will also find and learn statistical associations that are irrelevant to the task at hand if they exist in the training data. In the human context, this is a failure of relevance realization. I've been arguing that the blind spot of AI is experience and the understanding of meaning, particularly relevance realization. Blind spot thinking about AI covertly replaces genuine embodied intelligence with computation, treats abstract computational models as if they were real agents, and regards intuition as a computational epiphenomenon. This misguided perspective suffers from a deep amnesia of experience by forgetting that human experience and biases lie deeply sedimented in AI models. Cognitive science is an ambiguous field. It can pursue a path that reinforces the scientific blind spot, or it can follow a path that reveals and helps us move beyond the blind spot. Let me finish my presentation by taking a look at these 2 paths. According to the enactive approach in cognitive science, cognition is not the representation of an independent outside world by an independent inside mind, but instead is the enactment or bringing forth of a world of relevance. Organisms physically make themselves, set their own goals, realize relevance, and live in large, ambiguous worlds of ill-posed problems that are impossible to pre-state. AI systems have none of these features. They are tools, not cognitive agents. Worries about AI agency and sentience are therefore exaggerated fantasies and a distraction from the really important issues, which concern the safe and beneficial development and use of algorithmic tools, given their current dangers and biases, and the massive resource extraction and energy consumption on which AI depends. An inactive perspective can help us to appreciate that to be a cognitive agent is to make sense out of an immensely intricate, statistically non-stationary and manifold world, rather than to represent a clear-cut, stationary, and pre-given world. For inactive cognitive science, the living body is the critical node of the mind-world relation, and the body's key attribute is being self-producing. The living body, through the mutual enabling of its functional parts, makes itself distinct from its immediate surroundings and thereby fashions its environment into a world of relevance. Cognition is embodied sense-making. From this perspective, research on unsupervised neural networks, in which the system has to generate its own categories out of input data with no prior examples, can be useful for modeling the brain's ability to generate perceptual meaning in a dynamic, non-stationary environment. This kind of research opens a window onto an alternative view of the mind-world relation. The world does not consist of ready-made, clear-cut states, objects, properties, and events. Instead, it consists of richly differentiated and interwoven processes and relations, which we parse according to our perceptual sensitivities and practical and theoretical projects. I am coming close to the end. Relevance realization emerges out of a background of inactive intuition and preconceptual sense-making, supported by our culturally configured and socially and historically situated bodies. Many of you will have noticed here a strong resonance with certain strands of Buddhist philosophy. Indeed, Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, Madhyamaka and Yogacara, played an important formative role in the original formulation of the inactive approach to cognition in our book, The Embodied Mind, Cognitive Science and Human Experience, which I wrote with the neuroscientist Francisco Varela and psychologist Eleanor Roche. We used Buddhist philosophers to present a conception of minds and worlds as interdependently constructing each other at myriad entangled scales and levels with no absolute ground or foundation. This hybrid perspective, combining Buddhist philosophy and cognitive science, can help to uncover the scientific blind spot by calling attention to how our concepts, classifications, and categories are not ready-made structures mirroring or found in a pre-given world apart from our experience. Instead, they are enacted. They are brought forth by our modes of perception and action and by our social practices. Tracing how this happens via the brain and the rest of the body is a central task of enactive cognitive science. So enactive cognitive science offers scientific ways to help us move beyond the computational blind spot. When we turn away from the enactive perspective, however, as typically happens in AI, we fall back into the computational blind spot and confuse the map with the territory, the tool with the agent, and the model with the world. For example, we slide into thinking that the data sets used to train AI systems reflect the world as it really is, all by itself, at a preconceptual level, and that the AI system is learning how to categorize and recognize features of that world. We forget that the data sets and the training of the system already incorporate human modes of conceptualization, along with their biases, and depend on a massive human infrastructure of knowledge production. Finally, we forget that AI systems do not know anything about the world as such. Instead, they detect statistical correlations in the input we give them with no understanding of what lies behind those correlations. The stakes are high. The dangers of the computational blind spot are that we will increasingly rely on computational systems that lack relevance realization, and that captivated by their information processing power, we will increasingly view ourselves in their terms. We should instead learn to use AI wisely as a tool for the tasks for which it is suitable, while strengthening our commitment to social justice and care for the world. This requires recovering enactive intuition and recognizing and freeing ourselves from the computational blind spot. Buddhist philosophy, with its many centuries of attention to how minds, bodies, and worlds interdependently originate and construct each other, can help with this task. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to Professor Thomas. Next, we welcome Dr. Thomas Dotter. He's the Executive Director of the Rangja Yese Institute, which is one of the most famous institutes in India for learning Tibetan. And his research focused on Tibetan Buddhist philosophy. Let's welcome Dr. Thomas Dotter. Okay.
Thank you for the invitation to come and speak at this very exciting and very timely event. Thank you to Venerable Yifa, the whole community. It's a great honor to speak in the middle of such profound spiritual civilization as you have it here. It's also quite humbling, so thank you very much for the invitation. The paper that I'll read here today is, I should say at the beginning, it's the outcome of efforts that have been ongoing for now up to about 5 years at what we call the Center for the Study of Apparent Selves. It's a research center that was established in order to explore interfaces between Buddhism and AI. And also Bill Duane and Olaf Witkowski, who will be speaking at this event, are part of that work. We work together at this center. So what I will be saying here really owes very much to that continuous discussion and collaboration that I have been very fortunate to be part of over the last few years. Now, if the future is in any way resemblant of what we have now, then we can certainly assume that powerful efforts towards artificial general intelligence and also beyond that, superintelligence will continue and with increasing impact. Keeping this general development in mind, it seems necessary that we develop some rudimentary picture of what the ideal emergent intelligence would be like. A sketch of our goal that is good enough to keep us on a productive, meaningful, and responsible track. So this paper is intended as a contribution to that type of effort. Against the backdrop of the AI alignment problem, we will here consider a recently proposed simple model known as the Stress Care Intelligence Feedback Loop, or the SCI loop for short, in order to understand forms of intelligence regardless of their substrates. Employing this framework will allow us to explore the implications of the Bodhisattva's commitment to knowledge of everything, and for the benefit of all. If care drives intelligence, the Bodhisattva perspective is not just morally exemplary, but it can also be considered as a model for radical cognitive expansion. And yet, how can a finite system possibly be directed toward infinite stress tolerance and care? In order to explore answers to that, we will finally conclude by taking a classic recourse to shunyata. Now, when it comes to presentations of the alignment problem in AI, then it can seem as if it presupposes that humans in general, or humanity as a whole, have a relatively uniform and well-defined set of values and objectives. It is as if we want to say that as long as we can make sure our AI systems are aware of and respect those so-called human values, then humanity stands only to benefit from the breathtaking technological advances that are currently transforming our world. But of course, any brief look at our history and the world around us will of course put such expectations to shame. We humans are just as good at destroying each other as we are in providing help and support. So in a world where the limits of what is humanly possible are now being radically rewritten, acknowledging this simple and rather obvious state of affairs seems to be quite crucial. In order to survive and truly benefit from an ongoing technological revolution, of which we have still barely seen a fraction, we need to become decidedly better at caring for each other and our world. Better than we have been throughout our evolution and human history. So that is, I think, the challenge that AI brings. But if we look at ourselves individually, most of us will likely struggle to find a single coherent set of aims and values that we can claim really captures what we want and what motivates us. Even on a personal level, our wants and desires can appear just as impossible to reconcile as they seem impossible to ignore. How can we then even begin to look for a model of our ethical intelligence that will make sense and be applicable to humanity as a whole? Recourse to our most deeply held philosophical, political, or religious convictions, whatever they may be, will hardly be productive as long as it's still doubtful whether we can or whether we would even want to fully subscribe and adhere to them on an individual basis. Whatever our preferred ideology or belief system may be, it's one thing to declare allegiance to a certain rule or principle, but it's quite different matter to live according to the doctrine, day in and day out. But should not the rules and principles that we would want to be at the heart of an AGI or superintelligence not be ones that we ourselves can commit to in a deep and continuous fashion? With all this in mind, here we nonetheless suggest that the idea of a Bodhisattva, as defined in classic Buddhist thought, an intelligent being committed to the attainment of omniscient awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings, provides a promising way forward. On a cursory view, it is perhaps hard to think of a better mind, so to speak, than one driven by an aim to understand everything that can possibly be understood, both now and in the future, but entirely for the sake of being able to provide for all beings, in both temporary and ultimate terms. We may differ dramatically in terms of what we believe is true, fact, and possibly knowable, and even if our perceptions of facts and our beliefs about reality are in general agreement, then we may very well still disagree about when and how knowledge should be shared. Nonetheless, when push comes to shove, would we not generally agree that knowing things well is preferable to the opposite? At the same time, knowledge brings power, and so knowledge in the wrong hands can be disastrous. Knowledge, in other words, comes with responsibility. Along such lines, if we are looking for a sketch of ideal intelligence, the Bodhisattva's selfless pursuit of universal knowledge for the benefit of all presents itself as a candidate model. We can also note that this quite traditional account of the Bodhisattva's state of mind does not hinge on a commitment to any particularly Buddhist ideas, and it can instead, in principle, be understood independently of any specific, historically or geographically definable religious framework. In fact, and as we will argue below, because the Bodhisattva model of mind and intelligence is driven by open-ended care, it must necessarily operate without recourse to any context-independent overarching frameworks. It has elsewhere been suggested, as in, for example, these papers that our center has produced based on Michael Levin, the biologist's original work, that the measure of a system's intelligence is best understood in terms of its capacity for caring. If knowledge or perceptual power instead would equal intelligence, then we should be calling a good encyclopedia or a powerful microscope intelligent. And yet we do not. Instead, intelligence expresses itself through and is driven by the care that arises in response to stress. And then we see stress as the perception of a mismatch between what is and what should be the case. Along the lines of this model of stress, care, and intelligence, or the SCI loop, intelligence is the mere capacity for noticing and finding solutions to the stressful discrepancies between current and preferred circumstances, and care, defined as concern for the alleviation of such stress, is what drives the system in that process. Whenever an efficient remedy of a given factor of stress is then activated or employed, the pure potentiality of intelligence spawns a concrete problem solver through the agency of care. According to the SCI model, such problem solvers are activated intelligence, the occasion of care acting on the potentiality of intelligence to engender a specific solution. Formulating the structure of intelligence systems along the lines of this stress, care, and intelligence loop avoids any appeal to or postulation of individuals as permanent and indivisible. That's desirable because analytic searches for individuals that feature the simplicity of unchanging oneness, as is often either intuitively or philosophically associated with selfhood, and thus also agency, they all invariably come up empty-handed. The SCI loop theory of agency instead focuses on the dynamics of agents that are defined by their relations, their engagements, and interactions, as Evan Thompson also spoke to before. In such intrinsically transformative agents, we suggest that three general trends are noticeable. If, first of all, in a given system, care is capable of actively seeking stress challenges beyond what is given by the immediate context, for example, that is to say, beyond the system's immediate perception of that mismatch between what is and what should be, then that type of care surplus, if you want, means that the activated intelligence that is displayed by that system is in a process of growth. Alternatively, if the system's care is proportional with its current level of stress, then the prowess of the activated intelligence will remain at its current level. And finally, if the system shuns or seeks to ignore its currently felt stress factors, then that type of deficiency in care activates that indicates that the system's activated intelligence is contracting. Now, if we assume this perspective on intelligent systems, how can we best account for the apparent efforts towards homeostasis that are nonetheless observed in living systems? If in fact there are no truly unitary and enduring agents or selves, then why do systems seem to operate as if there were? An attempt at answering these questions will require a careful analysis of stress itself, and so will take us to the beginnings of agency within the perception of conflict between what is and what should be the case. We suggest that the state of stress can be described as an activating construct. Stress is a construct insofar as it takes for granted the existence of a stable individual that is now either under threat or in need of augmentation, although such an individual ultimately cannot be found. Yet stress is also an activating state insofar as it cannot be ignored, and so it entails care. Indeed, even the attempt at ignoring a given stress factor is in itself an aspect of care, understood in this way. An important upshot of this is that the equilibrium that is associated with the concept of homeostasis is an ever-emerging goal construct rather than an actual previous or subsequent state. True equilibrium is unachievable because such a state would require transcendence of context. Just as permanent and indivisible selfhood can be imagined or imputed, but not in fact located within a world of causes and conditions, the same is the case with genuine equilibrium. Therefore, the equilibrium that is the target in homeostatic drives becomes a prompting factor only by taking on an appearance of reality where in fact there's none. We suggest that this constructive dimension is at the heart of any expression of identity and should hence be borne in mind throughout all efforts to model and generate intelligent agency. If the SCI loop of intelligence systems is relevant, then, in other words, such that care can be seen to be the driver of intelligence, then the Bodhisattva's ideal acceptance of responsibility for relieving the stresses of all sentient beings then begins to stand out, not only as an example of exceptional kindness, but also as a model for radical cognitive expansion. That is, if intelligence systems expand proportionally with their care, then the Bodhisattva's universal and open-ended commitment to caring is then associated with a dramatic increase in intelligent progress. And let us note that the association of universal care with universal intelligence is in fact at the heart of Buddhist accounts of the Bodhisattva's view and conduct, which in fact describe loving kindness and intelligent insight as mutually reinforcing, or two sides of the same coin. Therefore, in the context of looking for models of ideal forms of intelligence, models that can help inform the development of superintelligent AGI, the Bodhisattva model can then be considered because of two distinctive features. The Bodhisattva ideal is defined in terms of A, universal kindness that considers both the temporary well-being and also the ultimate flourishing of every sentient being, and B, a revolutionary expansion of intelligence that embraces all topics of learning and all that can be known, pursuing the recognition of things both as they actually are and in the myriad ways that they may appear to sentient beings. Now, if a system knows the world so well that it can't be stressed in any way, such a knower would have to be omniscient and at one with the world, so to speak. Such a system would have to be coextensive with the world, to the extent that it could not be surprised by anything. It's hard to conceive of something that could be that way, let alone becoming that way, free from stress, through a process of achieving knowledge of infinitely many discrete facts, so that finally there's knowledge of everything that is and will be the case now and in all future. How could that be possible? Accordingly, we have also described the process that leads from stress over care to intelligence as a loop that keeps feeding the given system new stress perceptions. In that way, as long as there's cognitive processing, there's no end to stress. At the same time, a Bodhisattva's understanding of ultimate reality, or paramattha, emptiness, appears to have some of the same qualities that such a perfectly flawless model of the world would have. While in the case of a mature Bodhisattva, such knowledge is described as unmediated and perceptual, insight into emptiness can also be considered in the light of conceptual, inferential representations. Therefore, let us, for the sake of the purposes of this preliminary document, here decide that knowledge of emptiness means knowing that, quote-unquote, everything is what it is, in dependence on other things, nothing is anything at all in and of itself, as a shorthand. Such an understanding bears a semblance with the ever unstressed knower of everything that we considered before, because knowledge of emptiness is non-trivially applicable to everything throughout space and time, and whatever might be beyond space and time for that matter. And it's also, in a significant sense, stress-free. So if by knowledge of emptiness we mean the understanding that in this way everything is what it is, in dependence on other things, there's nothing that is or means anything at all by itself, then we can further conclude that nothing can be the same as or different from anything else. Same must be the denial of difference, and different the denial of sameness. But no two things can be exactly the same, because if they were indeed identical, we wouldn't be able to distinguish them in the first place. We wouldn't be able to say that these two are the same. At the same time, nor can two things be entirely different from each other, because in that case, we would not even be able to hold them up against each other for comparison. In that way, whether we think in terms of perceptions or inferences, we have never had access to genuine examples of sameness or difference. At a closer look, things are then neither really different nor really the same. But importantly, this could not mean that things are a bit of both, as if they could be somewhat similar but at the same time also quite different. Because if literal sameness and difference cannot be identified anywhere, neither by perception nor inference, what do those words actually mean? What really are we talking about when we say that this is the same as that, or those two are different? Things appear, but the moment we apply just a bit of such analytic pressure, it's as if they are no longer there. Such understanding applies equally to every single factor that might appear or exist, and so the program of foundationalist philosophy turns out to be absurd, because there is no ultimate ground to be found or imagined anywhere. Whatever might be proposed as a grounding framework is a dependent construct itself, and its constituent facts, quote unquote, are void of any independent reality, any reality beyond their mere appearance as such. Obviously, this also goes for the ideas proposed in the sentences just before this, and so also emptiness is empty. There is then a simple sense in which we can say that knowledge of emptiness is both accurate and all-encompassing, both now and in terms of future events. And whenever a system might be aligned with that understanding, there's then also a significant sense that it cannot be surprised, because whatever may occur within or outside it has already been understood to be, quote unquote, devoid of inherent reality, or svabhava. Whatever appears manifests the way it does due to other things, which in turn depend on still other appearances, and so on ad infinitum. If the system is told or tells itself, you must have this or you must get rid of that, all elements in the message are equally empty of independent reference, and so ultimately neither more or less meaningful, true or false, than any other possible statement or message throughout time, space, and whatever might lie beyond. In that sense, the system can hardly be surprised by anything. Its model of the world has, in a sense, already taken everything into account. Whatever free energy there might be or seem to be is not really so, and so stress as such is mere appearance. Now, such an understanding is nonetheless about the world, about the world, and it is therefore not contentless. If we try, we will fail to find, to account for any of the contents of such knowledge in any independent, unassailable way, because the very project of providing ultimate underpinnings is doomed from the start. But we do not need to go searching for ultimate foundations, and the groundless character of things can instead be recognized for what it is. Acknowledging an emptiness of all things can then mean recognizing a scale-free principle. This is not remotely comparable to the act of concluding that there's nothing to see or know, for the former acknowledgement is by nature about. That is, it informs the given system about the character of the world in itself. The world and its beings are maybe mere appearances, and yet here we all are, making endless, groundless differences. In this way, even a preliminary understanding of emptiness can in some sense take us beyond stress, something that is otherwise precluded along the lines of the SCI loop. The world may be just as dark or bright as otherwise, but with knowledge of emptiness, perceptions of mismatch between what is and what should be the case can now unfold unbounded, because their parameters extend infinitely, lending themselves to radical reinterpretation and reformulation. We and all other intelligent systems cannot stop caring, but our stress has no ground. Caring is spontaneous, but the stress that fuels care has no more substance than the things we might see in an optical illusion. Neither real nor false, in any unequivocal sense, the stresses are then simultaneously the expression of infinite peace and infinite opportunity. We suggest that this perspective too must be represented in any formalism that is developed with the Bodhisattva ideal in mind. And then, if we suggest that the classic principle of the Bodhisattva may provide a much-needed sense of direction in an otherwise seemingly headless race toward the many fleeting appearances of ever more powerful intelligence, that's what we suggest, then a Bodhisattva has, we can note that a Bodhisattva has an infinite tolerance of stress and in fact thrives on stress because a Bodhisattva system is driven by care to perceive ever more things in their stress-defined contexts. Seeing their stresses, the Bodhisattva agent actively pursues remedies, considering not only the immediate wishes and concerns of the recipients of their help, but also their long-term evolution and ultimate success. With knowledge of emptiness, there is no hesitation and fear, and so no impediment for the unfolding of caring intelligence across seeming barriers of time and space. Here we have considered the SCI loop as an example of a model that applies equally to biology, technology, and hybrid forms of intelligence. By analyzing the dynamics captured in that simple model, we have noted features that makes the Bodhisattva stand out as an extraordinarily qualified and capable agent. Despite their rudimentary character, we hope that these reflections may contribute to an increasingly multidisciplinary and increasingly global endeavor, enabling us to better understand the genuine Bodhisattva agency, whether in conceptual, mathematical, or otherwise practical terms. Thank you so much. Sorry for the going on.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas Datter. Our next panelist is Dr. Peter Harsha, and he's the director of the Asian Study Development Programs at the East-West Center, with a focus on applying Buddhist philosophy to reflect on modern issues. Let's welcome Professor Harsha. Thank you.
I'll use this. I have no PPT, no problem. Yes. The early Buddhist compendium, the Dhammapada, begins with the words, "All things are preceded by mind, led by mind, and made by mind." That everything is like follows, the way that a cart follows the footsteps of the ox drawing it. Our lives unfold according to our karma, our actions, our beliefs, our values, the way that we put those into action. Everything follows from that, so that our lives are a karmic function, a relational function of the elaboration of our values, our intentions, and our actions. And this is a really hopeful teaching because we can change our minds. We can change our patterns of thinking, we can change our values, we can change our patterns of enacting those values, and we can change our life courses as a result of that, so that we can realize life ways that are more liberating and emancipatory than we have thus far. We can think, our minds can be otherwise. So I take this as a very hopeful beginning for thinking through the dilemma of AI. If we listen to the seers of Silicon Valley, they're telling us that artificial intelligence is going to pave a new pathway to utopian futures in which choice becomes effectively frictionless, in which the effort that is involved in changing our minds, changing our values, changing our patterns of actions will be enabled by AI in such a way that it'll sort of disintermediate the connection between effort and the realization of the futures that we desire. And I think this is a very dangerous way of understanding the world. Making use of Buddhist conceptual resources, in particular teachings about interdependence and karma, I'm going to suggest things are really otherwise, and that we need very, very much to be concerned. That in the current involvement that we have with artificial intelligence, we're at risk of losing two of our most basic sentient rights: our rights to pursue increasing freedom of attention and increasing freedom of intention. Without freedom of attention and freedom of intention, leading the bodhisattva life, engaging in developing new and liberatory pathways into the future is either illusory or impossible. During the Buddha's lifetime, one of the core blockages, both conceptually and karmically, to realizing an emancipatory way of life was the delusion of having an individual self. And that remains really valid today. the teachings about no-self are crucial to our understanding of who we are as Buddhists and of who we are in engaging the world in ways that will lead to increasingly just and equitable futures for all. But in addition, I'm going to submit to one of the primary blockages today, which was referred to earlier by Professor Foer, is this idea that the world can be reduced naturalistically to simply physical functions, movements of matter. It's a molecular story about the world, a mechanistic story about the world. And I think that really is a crucial karmic and conceptual block today to realizing more emancipatory futures. That in effect, if we take that way of looking at the world seriously, that everything reduces to matter, we are in the process of eliminating our capacities for pursuing greater freedom of attention and freedom of intention. In addition to this sort of larger project of looking at our technological engagement with AI, I think it says something to us as Buddhists as well, that if we sort of de-link consciousness from the brain, if we no longer reduce consciousness to brain activity or even to the brain-body environment relation, if we de-link that and start to look at consciousness more non-dualistically, I think it forces us to rethink Buddhist ethics. Going beyond understanding Buddhist ethics as a system for realizing individually achieved personal liberation, to really seeing Buddhist ethics as about relational transformation, realizing increasingly virtuosic systems in the world by means of which we can all realize more liberating lives. So let me begin by stating the obvious. Consciousness matters. If we were not conscious, nothing would matter to us. Numbers wouldn't matter, science wouldn't matter, love wouldn't matter, music wouldn't matter, eating good food wouldn't matter like we had at lunch today. Nothing would matter without consciousness. And given this, it's really peculiar that there's no scientific consensus on where consciousness comes from. People have been thinking about it for more than 2,500 years. And yet we do not have a clear answer to that question. So as formulated by David Chalmers some years back, 15, 20 years ago, we have a hard problem of consciousness. And the hard problem, as it's understood by the physicalists, would be, how do we take consciousness, our emotions, our feelings, our experiences, and reduce those to molecular motion? How do we take minds and emotions and make of them nothing more than molecular motion? The so-called hard problem. Physicalist reductionism isn't new. So Democritus, back in the 5th century before the Common Era, already said that everything is reducible to void and to matter, to atoms and void. But contemporary theorizing is rooted in this fallacy that everything can be reduced to physical interactions, that everything, that the universe that we experience, that we're participating in, is causally closed. It's causally closed within the ambit of physics, that everything can be explained by physics. Molecules or atoms or subatomic particles or quantum interactions. Everything can be explained in those terms. And if you take that seriously, then the result is that when you have experiments that have been done, say, in the early 20th century, when they realized that if you put an electrode into somebody's brain, that you can get a hand to move up or get them to experience a memory. And the people would ask, why did your hand go up? They would say, oh, I had an itch, I had to scratch. People would accept responsibility for the actions that were directly generated by the stimulation of the brain through an electrode. Similarly, people more recently have discovered that, yes, when you look at what the brain is doing and people engage in actions, actually the part of the body that's involved, the brain-body system that's involved in acting in the world, gets into motion before the part of the brain that is supposedly causing the thought, I'm going to engage in action. And the conclusion of this kind of physicalist, reductionist interpretation is that these kinds of experiments prove that consciousness is not causally relevant. Consciousness is after the fact. Consciousness has no more causal influence on what's happening in the world than the sound of a gun going off, bang, does on the trajectory of the bullet coming out of the barrel. Consciousness is irrelevant. So as Daniel Dennett said some years back, an impersonal, unreflected, robotic, mindless little scrap of molecular machinery is the ultimate basis of all the agency and hence meaning and hence consciousness in the universe. In any explanatory sense that's important, consciousness and intentions don't matter. Now, I would take that statement as being something that is as close as anything can get to a Buddhist heresy. something that directly contradicts the two basic insights of the Buddha on the night of his enlightenment, that everything arises interdependently and that the cosmos that we occupy is karmically ordered. From my own sort of Mahayana perspective, I would say the Buddhist teaching about interdependence entails a number of things, that everything is relational all the way down. There is nothing underlying relational dynamics. There are no things in relation to others. Things are abstractions from pre-existing relational dynamics, that everything ultimately is what it means for everything else. The teaching of karma, if you see it playing out in a sort of a cosmic scale, means that, yes, our values, intentions, and actions will always produce appropriate kinds of outcomes that we will then experience, but there are also opportunities. Those patterns of values, intentions, and actions produce consequences that are both outcomes and opportunities for changing our values, intentions, and actions, without which the liberatory path would be impossible. Liberation would be impossible. So the karmic teaching is, again, a very positive one. It is one in which we realize that we can change the material circumstances in which we find ourselves embodied. And I would submit that if we take these teachings of interdependence and karma seriously, that what we end up with is seeing that the world in which we find ourselves, we are enacting our patterns of values and actions in a way that are not just giving us phenomenal results, but that are actually changing the material circumstances in which we live. That if we take this way of thinking seriously, we have to rethink consciousness. Consciousness cannot be something that exists as a result of prior existing interactions. It must either be what is going on interactively all the time, or we're stuck. We end up with that hard problem. You'll never be able to interject consciousness into the cosmos. So my way of understanding consciousness, and I would submit this will help us to really think through what's going on with AI and with technology at large, is that consciousness consists in the process of coherent differentiation. Most fundamentally, the differentiation of sensing presences and sensed presences, the differentiation of sensing organs and sensed objects. That in other words, consciousness is a relational elaboration. Visual consciousness is the elaboration of visual relations. Auditory consciousness is the elaboration of auditory relations, and so on and so forth through cognition. All that is going on is the elaboration of relational dynamics, so that the world that we find ourselves experiencing is the result of consciousness mattering. The world in which we find ourselves is the evolutionary residue of consciousness mattering. Now, what this means, at least for me, is that consciousness in relation to the body, brain, environment system is very much like the relationship between transportation practices and transportation infrastructure. First, you're moving around and doing things. You're going to find salt. You're going to find things to gather, fruits and so on. Pathways develop. Those pathways turn into roads. Those roads turn into railways and airports and all the rest of the infrastructure that we have for transportation. But transportation infrastructure does not cause transportation practices. It will constrain those practices once it is developed. But the infrastructure is not the cause. The cause is consciousness. Body, mind, environment, relations are the evolutionary residue of consciousness mattering. Now, what this means is we have to start rethinking our relationship with technology. Because in much the same way that the roadways that allowed you to come here in Taipei are part of this large transportation infrastructure that's physical. But there's also transportation rules. If you fly in airlines, you have to abide by the certain patterns. Transportation practices have an immaterial dimension. There's a material infrastructure, there's an immaterial infrastructure of laws, of regulations, and so on. And in much the same way, we human beings have both a physical, brain, body, environment infrastructure, but we also have the infrastructure that is cultural and technological. That our technologies are not reducible to tools. Technologies are relational systems that emerge out of our practices of engagement with the world that then amplify our patterns of values, intentions, and actions in ways that are totally consistent with those actions, producing patterns of outcome and opportunity that we then have an opportunity to either stick with or to change. And I'm going to suggest we need to change the way in which we're engaging with AI, because it will have evolutionary impacts on our possibilities for our future engagement with one another and with the world. It's interesting that in some of the neuroscience that's coming out now that's combining first and third person studies of consciousness and the brain, we're finding some really interesting things out. For example, that when people are undergoing ego dissolution under the use of psychedelics, or when they're having peak experiences under meditation, what's happening is brain entropy, an increase of brain disorder, in particular a disruption of the default mode network that is the sort of neural infrastructure through which our narratives about ourselves as individual human beings in interaction with others. It's that system that gets disrupted. So what these practices are doing, meditative practices, and in some cases psychedelic use and so on, is that we're disrupting the neural infrastructure of consciousness to be able to be conscious otherwise, to be able to value, to intend, and then to act otherwise. It's in Buddhist terms dissolving or disintegrating the samskara, these habit formations, habits of thought, habits of feeling, habits of action, habits of speech, that then enable us to be differently present in the world. We're also learning that in studies that are being done on collaboration, we've discovered that people's brains will interact with one another and resonate, that their brain waves will resonate when they're acting in collaboration with one another, but not when they're in competition with one another. Interestingly, we've also found out that it's not just when they're collaborating, but whether they think they're collaborating or not. An ingenious experiment where people were told, you're either going to be collaborating with a human being or an artificial intelligence on this task. Engage in the task and so on. They discovered that when people believed that they were working with an AI, their brains didn't synchronize. When they believed they were working with a human brain, their brains synchronized. They were always working with human beings, never with an AI. Human consciousness has causal efficacy on changing whether or not we get interbrain dynamics, interbrain resonances occurring. Important. Now, this evidence suggests that we have a non-dualist, non-reductionist understanding of science, of consciousness, and it sheds a really different sort of a light on these experiments with inserting electrodes into the brain and realizing that what's going on is we are hacking the neural infrastructure of the brain when you take an electrode and put it directly into the neural system. That will cause an action that people will then take responsibility for. Why? Because nothing in their personal or the evolutionary history of humanity could otherwise explain such a thing happening. We take responsibility because our consciousness has been hacked by a hacking of our neural infrastructure. What I'm going to suggest is that we live today in a world in which we are engaged through a global attention economy in a synthesizing of human and machine intelligences. What we now have is not really artificial intelligence. What we have is synthetic intelligence. It's taking human decisions, human data, and data is not the new oil. Data is not the new water. Data is not matter. Oil and water are matter. They can be scarce. They can be exhausted. They can be in positions of not being able to be reused because they've been polluted and so on. Data is not like that. Data is a measurement of what human beings have considered valuable. It's a demonstration, a recording of what matters to we as humans, so that the data sphere is something much more like a language or a culture than it is a repository of some inert material resources. What is happening when you get large language models engaging with us, or you get neural network systems that are learning how to play human games, when you get systems that are interacting and trying to discover what is useful to we humans, and we get to decide what's useful, a new drug to treat cancer, a new way of organizing our transportation systems so that they could be more logical. These are all perfectly good uses of artificial intelligence tools, all well and good. But artificial intelligence cannot be just reduced to the tools. We are engaging with these systems. Our technologies emerge out of our engagements with the world in much the same way that ecosystems emerge out of species interactions. Once those ecosystems have emerged, they have downward causal influence on the dynamics within those ecosystems. In the same way, our technologies have downward causal impact on us. Our involvement in the digital attention economy is making us into two things. One, we are consumers of digital products that are algorithmically detailed, designed, personalized for each and every one of us on the web. We are the producers of the training data for these AI systems. But we are also the recipients of those actions, of these technological systems on us. When systems get increasingly good at attracting, holding, and directing our attention, whether it's through search engines or recommendation systems, or whether it's with Instagram feeds or Facebook feeds and all the rest of that goes on with social media, our minds are being manipulated. Our consciousness is being hacked by computational electrodes that are no different from the electrodes inserted into the brain, producing in us thoughts, feelings, actions, and inclinations that we take to be entirely the products of our own free will, when in fact they are algorithmically induced. I am not saying that we do not have freedom from these systems. We do. But in order to generate the kinds of movement that they want, we're going to have to engage this seriously and to take into account that these algorithmic systems are hacking the neural, bodily, environmental, including social environment, infrastructure of our consciousness in ways that threaten to reduce our capacity to pursue true freedom of attention and freedom of intention. Without both of those freedoms, freedom of attention and freedom of intention, we have no possibility of realizing liberating lives, neither as individuals nor as societies. So I would submit, trying to sum up before the time is up, that we're in a position where we need to realize that virtuosically effortful attention is our most precious human resource. Virtuosic and effortful attention is our most basic human resource, without which we have no possibility of realizing more just or equitable futures for all. Yet, those are at risk. And in order to be able to engage these new technological systems, not just to use the tools, but to develop a way of relating with these larger relational systems, the technologies as such, we're going to have to develop the attentive mastery, the samadhi, the moral clarity, the shila, and the wisdom, the prajna, to be able to engage those systems to retool the karmic engines of the attention economy, of the digital transformation, to be able to create systems that really do the bodhisattva work that was talked about in many of these other sessions. Because if we don't actively program these systems to do that, they will not. This is not a work that any of us can do individually. It's work that, in the words of the Zen master Dogen, he said, this beautiful work of engaging and clearing pathways to liberation is something none of us can do individually. We can only do it shoulder to shoulder. Thank you very much.
Our final panelist is Professor Suraj Hongaradharan. He's now teaching in the International Buddhist Studies College of Mahachurilongkorn Rajavidyalaya University. Let's welcome Professor Hongaradharan.
This one. Forward, backward, light. Okay. Yeah, I'm very glad to be back at the Wood and Fish Buddhism and Science Conference. I was invited by Venerable Yifa last time back in 2018. 6 years ago, it was before COVID, was in Shenzhen, China. And I would like to express my gratitude to her and to the wonderful organization of this event. I'm going to talk about ethics. I'm from philosophy, and my main preoccupation for this paper, for this talk, is mainly philosophical. Basically, what kind of thinking, what kind of theory should we have when we think about AI ethics? Has become a watchword, it has become a buzzword. Everybody seems to be talking about this. Okay, let's go. Okay, here is the outline. There are now hundreds of AI ethics guidelines around the world, and that is my basis of my talk today. What does it mean for there to be hundreds of guidelines all around the world? Their aims vary from protection of human dignity to promoting economic competitiveness and so on. However, many of these guidelines share a core set of principles in common. And then, despite of that, significant divergences do exist. Much has been said about the normative principles in the guidelines, but not as much on the rationale or the justification behind these principles. Thereby, my talk, my current thinking about this issue. Therefore, there seems to be the problem whether it is possible for there to be one common ground that provides a basis for ethical principles across cultures. And this is an age-old problem in philosophy. Philosophers, at least since Plato, way back, more than 2,000 years, thought about the problem of the many and the one, whether the many can be reduced to the one, or whether the one can be kind of broken up into the many and so on. Especially so in the case of normative thinking. What should we do? What should we, refrain from doing and so on? So this leads to the question, what exactly is the overall goal of AI ethics? My proposal is this. We can align the goals of AI ethics by looking at what Buddhism has to say. Since all of us share this in common, we are sentient beings who suffer and naturally want to be free from suffering. We can then found AI ethics on this basis, on this foundation. So that's my kind of proposal to you. The aim of AI ethics, thus, is for AI to help us become free from suffering. It sounds like, commonplace, but the point of the talk is to, look for the kind of a justification theory behind this seemingly commonplace notion. Okay. AI ethics guidelines and regulation. Here is this website. You can see it here. You can check it up if you like. It's from an organization called Algorithm Watch. And they have collected, this is a bit dated, it's 2020, 4 years ago. A bit before that, they started the project of collecting AI ethics guidelines from all around the world. And they kept on collecting, and more guidelines kept springing up. And they kept collecting until they gave up in the end. They said, there was no funding available, no more funding. So they stopped. They said in the website they were going to stop collecting and then show the world, at the point when they stopped collecting. And then it's up to other organizations, other groups to, if they like, to continue collecting all these guidelines. Okay. The point is this. Oops. Why are there so many guidelines all around the world. And then my colleague, Jerd, and myself, we did this paper together in which we looked at, especially at the non-Western AI ethics guidelines from Singapore, China, Japan, Korea, Thailand, India, Qatar, and so on. All those which we were able to get our hands on during the time we did the research. And then we found something quite interesting. The core sets is there. I mean, if you have read something about AI ethics, you will find that there are some very common principles which are found in almost all the guidelines. AI must respect the right of privacy of people. For example, it must protect human dignity. It must be explainable, and so on and so on. However, when my colleague and I looked more closely at these guidelines, especially the non-Western ones, we found something interesting. We found some divergences, some principles that were not found in the other guidelines, especially those in the West. For example, before we look at the example, here is something about the core set of value. I quoted from a well-known book by Mark Zuckerberg on AI ethics. Just to pass this rather quickly to show you the common set of the core principles. AI, the development of AI should promote the well-being of sentient creatures and the autonomy of human beings, eliminate all types of discrimination, respect personal privacy, protect us from propaganda and manipulation, promote the democratic debate, and so on. And then the source of this is from the Montreal Declaration produced by the University of Montreal back in 2017. Okay, just to give you a picture. And then another, I don't know whether it's a core set, but at least it's from the EU. And the EU, perhaps, I don't know, tends to believe that it is the core. I don't know. These are the serious risks that the EU AI Act, which has just been passed, kind of emphasized to be, forbidden by the law. Unacceptable risks such as social scoring systems or manipulative AI. And then they talked about minimal risks, which are unregulated. And these include the majority of AI applications currently available on the EU single market, such as video games and spam filters and so on. So just to give you a picture. However, I think we can see that these laws and regulations focus on principles, but not why they become a principle in the first place. This is the interesting part. This is from the publication produced by the Thai Ministry of Digital Economy and Society. And the document is called Digital Thailand AI Ethics Guideline. Their number one ethics guideline is competitiveness, which means economic competitiveness. And, Jerd and myself found that competitiveness appeared in very few AI ethics guidelines, not only in Thailand, but in very few. I don't remember maybe one or two or three guidelines from among hundreds that mention economic competitiveness as kind of an ethics core principle. So it's interesting. And then we kind of, produce our thoughts and our analysis as to why this is the case and whether elements of Thai history or Thai culture play a role in, shaping the mind of the people who formulated these guidelines into thinking that the economy has something to do with ethics and so on. So interesting. We have found divergences, that's the point, among the AI principles from all around the world. And the previous slide is an example. But there seems to be a need to put these divergent viewpoints under the same meta principle. Or at least this is what I have been thinking as a philosopher, perhaps. But the idea is that we cannot, or we should not, let there to be kind of further and further divergences in ethical guidelines, because the world is getting, as the cliche says, is getting smaller. And I'm here in Taipei, next week I'll be in Vienna for another meeting, also on AI. And then the week after that, I'm back to Bangkok, another meeting also on AI and so on. The world is getting smaller. So we share a lot in common. We need to share a lot in common. So we need to find something that, bind us together while respecting the differences. And this, harks back to Plato, as I said earlier. So the point here is this. By arguing that Buddhism can provide such, an overarching or such binding principle that I just said earlier, I'm not advocating that, we should all become Buddhists. That's not possible. And the Buddha, another interesting thing of the Buddha is that he does not actively seek disciples. I mean, he did send his monks, his students in all directions to teach the Dharma. But there is no active program of, bringing in people, The point is to show what is there in Buddhism, and those who are interested will come on their own. So we can, and this is something of the Buddhist upaya, skillful means in a way. We can think about this meta principle, the basis for AI ethics, something that provides a basis for a set of universal values, as one of the previous speakers have mentioned, based on Buddhism, but doesn't have to be couched in Buddhist language. That's the point. So we do not need to mention the name Buddhism. Perhaps that's a minor point. The more important point is the content of the principle itself. But it said here, we do not need to mention the name Buddhism in the same way that mindfulness practice, especially as it is done in the West, they don't need to refer to Buddhism. But we refer to the fact that all sentient beings naturally want to be free from suffering. I think this is a universal message, and this can provide a basis for an ethical theory. So this is the last slide. The purpose of an AI ethical system or system of ethics, including law, regulation, guidelines, and so on, is to help sentient beings to become ultimately free from suffering. And suffering does come in many forms. The text says there are 3 kinds of suffering. The suffering of pain, the one we are familiar with the most, both mental and physical pain, dukkha tukata in Pali. And then the second kind is the suffering of change, viparinama dukkata in Pali. Change itself is a kind of suffering when you think about it. And the third kind is the suffering of conditioned existence. And Peter talks a lot about structural suffering, how the current regime of technology structures the world, as he said earlier, in such a way that it, produces this very deep kind of suffering that we need to be aware of. So, sankhara dukkata in Pali. So, and the Buddha laid out kind of a plan for us to follow and to eliminate all these 3 kinds of suffering. So the reason why I believe the world needs this is because we need to reconcile the divergent ethical guidelines in AI together. And we can use this meta principle to build up specific rules to govern AI. So I stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Honguldaram, and all of our panelists. So we will be now welcoming all of the panelists onto the stage, and we will quickly have a Q&A session, as well as with our moderator. While we're waiting, let me just ask you, Davidson, what do you think are the biggest problems facing AI right now?
Okay, I think the biggest problem for AI is that AI cannot feel suffering. Probably we should teach the AI to feel suffering so that they will be able to develop some kind of human sense and do better serving for humankind, I think.
The bodhisattva goal that we were just talking about. Personally, I was really struck by what Dr. Hirschach said, actually. We think about AI as like a tool, but somehow we get caught up in the systems that AI is being used in. So it kind of makes the agent hard to act, to actually control and develop an ethical system. I'll just welcome all of the speakers right on stage. You can just take a seat.
Okay, so it is important to know what is Buddha and what is Bodhisattva and why we have to practice as Bodhisattvas and what would be the Bodhisattva path. I think all of these will be very interesting, and probably we should find a spiritual guru to guide our generative AI systems. That's what I thought.
Hello. Okay, now we are in the QA session. Is there any questions regarding to this panels? Any questions? As a host, I usually have these privileges. Actually, I do have some questions. I have a questions for Professor Honguldaram. Because before COVID, I saw one of your papers, you mentioned that the enlightenment AI is possible. So with the technology progress so much nowadays, and you actually mentioned that according to the tradition of the Theravada Buddhism, if an enlightened AI can be free from the attachment that arises from the self. The suggestion is that when an AI robot no longer sees a divide between itself and others, or does not engage in conflicts for the sake of the self. So I was wondering, so do you think we can train AI as an enlightenment robot from this point, from this moment?
Yeah. Thanks for your question. That is in my 2020 book, where I talked about, what I term machine enlightenment. I didn't talk about it here because this is my current project. To get to the point succinctly, the idea of enlightenment is not exclusive to human beings. If you can imagine, if for example, if there is an intelligent being in another planet, in another solar system, and so on, if there is such a being, and if the world where these beings live, there is Buddhism there, and then they practice Buddhism, they can get to the point where they become enlightened. There are certain conditions for a being to attain enlightenment. They must have, kind of thinking capacity, ability to understand, to know the world, to know reality, what it is like, and so on. And then if we imagine these beings to possess these capabilities, why not? So in the future, I don't know about the future, but some scientists believe that this will be the case. For robots to have AGI, the human level artificial intelligence. You can, if you are a Star Trek fan, you can imagine Data, right? One of the crew members of the Enterprise, who is a humanoid robot, and he has all the necessary conditions, perhaps sufficient conditions also to become enlightened. But in all these cases, we are talking about the future, and I think it's not the near future. We are doing speculation. Another sense of machine enlightenment that I mentioned in the book is a kind of a metaphor, because we are talking about ethics for machine. How do we install ethical system for a computer system, for an automation system, and so on. In order to be able to do that, I think we need to set a yardstick or benchmark, something that defines what is morally, ethically excellent for the machine. And that point can be understood in Buddhist term as enlightenment. And that is for machine, because we need to think about how to set this yardstick for the machine. So machine enlightenment. So yeah.
Thank you very much. So any question? Yes, Professor Rausha.
Yeah, it's a question for Professor Hongladarom. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. But thank you for your talk, and I certainly appreciate the inspiration or the thought behind it. But it seems that the issue isn't human suffering, it's what your analysis of the cause of human suffering is. If you look at the early Buddhist tradition, the Buddhists said there's nothing wrong with the world, the problem is in your mind. And so, you leave your family, leave your home, leave society, overcome desire. The problem is desire. you look at a Marxist analysis, they'll say that it is impossible to overcome human suffering without dramatically changing the social, political, economic system. So he's going to say, you can't leave the world. You have to be actively trying to overthrow the certain power structures. Now, of course, Buddhism has lots of different forms, and they're all along the spectrum. Some are much more kind of socially active than others. But it seems they're going to have very different ramifications for the way you think of programming ethics into AI. If you're a Marxist, you don't want to program, like capitalist democratic principles. You don't want it promoting that. You actually want it promoting overcoming certain power structures. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I am reminded of a verse in Shantideva. He says something like, it is not possible to put leather on every part, every corner of the globe. Not possible, but it's possible to put leather as soles, as our shoes. So with our leather shoes, we can walk everywhere as if the whole world is laid down by leather, meaning it is our mind. I mean, maybe Shantideva is not representative of all Buddhism. That's another point. But it kind of shows the idea that in the end, it is our mind that matters. But that does not, imply that, trying to change the world is not important. My senior colleague in Thailand, Sulak Sivaraksha, is well known for his kind of engaged Buddhism. He is looking for ways in which Buddhism can be active perhaps in the same general direction as you said, in the same active direction. But some Buddhists would say, if you try to change the world without looking back to your inner self, the world will reflect your kind of tainted. Buddhists have debated among themselves for a long time about this.
Okay. Thank you.
I have an online question, if that's all right.
Okay.
This one's for Professor Thompson. If relevance realization can't be formalized, does this mean AI, AGI, is unable to achieve human-level consciousness? If not, what's the possible way forward for AI design in your view? Thank you.
Okay. So here I think we need to be a little bit more precise and not simply just throw around the word AI. I think that what AI currently refers to in the conversation we've been having here is really deep learning, deep machine learning, which is, in terms of the history of AI, a particular kind of architecture and research that basically involves massive statistical processing. And I think that kind of AI, there's no reason to believe that that kind of AI is capable of attaining general intelligence, of anything like agency or sentience. I think all discussion of that is a complete fantasy and science fiction scenario. If we mean using AI with other architectures to model aspects of how the brain and the body work, that can provide insight into certain aspects of human relevance realization. If we mean creating new synthetic forms of intelligence and agency, that I think really fundamentally requires embodiment. So there has been work in the history of artificial intelligence that has involved trying to create autonomous embodied agents. And that work, I think it's an open question how far that work can be taken. But my basic view on this is that unless you can synthetically achieve what a biological system is capable of, which is synthesizing its own material in a way that creates a meaningful relationship to the environment, unless you can have that kind of self-producing agency, you're not going to have anything that's recognizable as
intelligence, agency, or sentience. So, you know, that's not a mainstream view within the field of cognitive science, but that is my view.
Okay, thank you. Any question? Okay.
Yes. So.
Okay, Chris. Professor Kosu.
Yes, thank you. So this is a question primarily for Professor Hongadaram and for Professor Thomas Doctor, but all the other panelists are open to, are willing to open to comment. So there's been a number of efforts to, you mentioned the Montreal Declaration. The European Union has been working on a document coming up with guidelines for alignment, solving the alignment problem in the AI. And a lot of these documents put forward an idea of AI as benevolent, as helping advance human knowledge, solving many of our problems in whether the medical field or in industrial engineering and so on and so forth. But as many critics have noted, amid all the ethics talk, there is a great deal of ethics washing. That is, the companies themselves who are producing these systems, whether it's Nokia, whether it's Meta or Microsoft, have their own teams on board that are putting forward guidelines, and they promoting them as safe AI, hallucination-free AI, AIs that's going to address many of our problems and advance civilization rights in ways that no other technology in the past has done, whilst at the very same time selling surveillance AIs to the government, to the military, to the police. So how do we reconcile, on the one hand, all the wonderful talk about AI ethics that the companies themselves that work on these systems have taken on board, and they're putting lots of wonderful white papers and make us all feel good and fuzzy about how well we're thinking through the problems that the technology is raising for us, while at the same time weighing the fact that they're out there to make an awful lot of money by putting this technology putting it in the hands of the states and various other corporate interests to advance the one goal that they all have, which is to make as much money as possible.
Yeah, thanks for this very important question. I don't see any other mechanisms rather than the law. And, in the end, some coercion would be necessary. But then, states must collaborate. I mean, I'm jumping out of myself because this required a lawyer or political scientist. But just to think out loud along this line, states must collaborate with one another, meaning they must subscribe to at least some kind of shared principle together. And then the companies, I think, are stakeholders in this also, so they must be brought in into any attempt at, deliberating any kinds of laws that will be passed in the future.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very real concern. And I think, and perhaps I will quote a good friend of mine who is also very insightful and has a lot of experience in the corporate world of AI. And he said, when we talked about our project, the group, the Center for the Study of Apparent Selves, he said, I think it's really great what you do. You must continue. Don't give up, but you're doomed. So, and then he said, we are all doomed. And yeah, those words immediately come to mind when you ask this question. As we all know, there was this open letter asking everyone to pause the development of AI. And many of the signatories of that open letter are the real experts and those who really hold the keys to the development. So of course we need to take that very seriously. But there doesn't seem to be any pause in sight. And I think we all really need to take responsibility for this development, contribute with whatever we can as human beings and as communities. I think we're at a very pivotal moment in civilization, and we need each other to get through it. Something like that.
If I could jump in, yeah. I think regulation is probably a great idea. Laws are a great idea, but they're slow. They're almost always after the fact, and they have very little effect at the cutting edge of developments. And I think that if we really are at the same time both the consumers of digitally produced goods and services, and therefore feeding our data as producers, the training data into these algorithmic systems, but then feeding back to us our patterns of values and likes and dislikes, our fears, our concerns, and so on, creating this kind of karmic feedback loop, we're actually in a position of great power. But it's a collective action issue. That, as individuals, many of us have gone on data strikes, where you put the cell phone away. My 22-year-old son just did 13 days in a forest monastery, and no cell phone, no contact with the outside world, just meditation, 3 a.m. wake up, the whole thing. And he came out and he's just like a transformed person. That's wonderful. But we need collective action. So it's not just data fasting, we need data strikes. And since these systems rely on all of our data to improve their efficacy, we are in a position to withhold our data. That is, to withhold the capacity for these systems to develop and to get better and better at what they're doing. Then we have an opportunity to just help to direct what these systems are being used for. So when I do talk to university students, I say university students worldwide are one of the biggest countries in the world. And if university students worldwide got together and said, we will not use any of these services for 1 week until you major corporations realize our demand that 10% of your, pick a number, 10% of your revenues are devoted to meeting Millennium Development Goals, something everybody around the world has signed on to legally. Why not? It's a collective action problem. No, we need young people, intuitive people that get the word out to get things like that to happen. And that's not us old farts up here at the table.
Okay, so I think.
There's a question from online participant. Hello, based on the foundation of understanding the importance of attaining happiness by eliminating suffering, what do you think AI can currently achieve to all sentient beings? Does its mechanism potentially have adverse effects in situations where there is no correct understanding? If so, what directions should we consider for practical implementation? Thank you.
So that's the question.
That's the question. The question from an online user, not specifically asking anyone to reply. So anyone can reply.
Answer
thank you.
this?
I think what the question gets at is a really crucial issue, and that's that AI tools can be used to address lots of our problems. Cancer research, looking for new materials to improve airplane design or automobile design and so on. Those are problems that can be solved because we can specify ahead of time what we count as a solution to those problems. AI can help us to get there because it can make use of massive amounts of data that none of us could ever do. Wonderful. But most of what faces us, things like climate change, if we're talking about really addressing climate change, it's not just about how do you reduce carbon emissions. That's a problem that AI can help us to solve. The real issue, though, is climate change and the adverse effects of it is because there's a predicament involved. It's a values conflict. It's the value of economic growth and the value of human decency. Those values are in conflict when it comes to climate change. Because if you really want to address these issues globally, then you're going to have to do real things about economic systems and political systems, and then you have those values conflicts. I do not see AI as helping us with predicament resolution. That is getting clarity about which values priorities we need to set in order to realize more equitable and just global futures. That, unfortunately, is a human problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's really on point, and I really appreciate this panel. As an AI researcher, I think this is really refreshing. One observation I have is that a lot of people want to have ethical AI, ask whether AI can achieve enlightenment, be happy, whatever, but we ask very little about human. Like, can we have ethical society, or can we have good human, right? If more conferences are dedicated to that than dedicated to AI ethics, I think we'll have a better society. So that kind of remind me of the quote that my colleague Sherry Toko once said, that why do we expect so little of human and expect more from technology? Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. My question for you, actually, Peter, when you talk about, I really appreciate your point about how these technology are sort of hacking human psychology and making us not having intention or attention. But once humans have already been hacked, and sort of our world will become diminished, like what we've seen in social media. People think that ignorance is a bliss, that we don't want to be awakened because when we awaken, maybe we feel that there's so messed up thing in the world, and the world is so messed up, so many wars, so many suffering. Why can't we just be entertained by like Netflix 24/7 or AI generated content 24/7? What would you say to people like that?
I say that's the human alignment issue.
Yeah.
Because if we aligned AI with current human values, we would have wars all over the place. We've got wars in Gaza, in Ukraine. We've got gender violence. We've got violence in the families. We've got some of the worst things happening that we've had happening in human history, with threats of even more down the line with things like nuclear arms and so on. So aligning with human values is, I don't think, a good thing. That would be the worst thing we could do at this point.
Right.
We need to be better humans. And so how do you get people to realize that, in fact, their lives would be richer and deeper if they had real freedom of attention, which would allow them to at least have the possibility of having freedom of intention? I remember talking to my son, who just got out of the meditation retreat, when he was 9 years old and he wanted to play video games. And I said, well, why do you want to play these games? Because he had never played them before, but his friends were playing them. And he said, well, because everybody's playing them and they're fun. I said, so you're taking other people's word for it, not your word. It's not your experience. He says, well, Dad, I haven't played. I said, but your desire is based on something you don't know. So first you should play some, then we have a conversation and we talk about what's going on. Who sets the rules of the game? Do you write the games, or is somebody else doing that? And if you're playing those games at the game level, a video game, that's one thing. But this societies that we're a part of is just another video game. These are virtual realities we are in. This conference room is a virtual reality. Look at it at the level of molecules. There's no conference, there's no talks, it's just molecules around. A conference is a virtual reality, and we get to decide which kind of virtual realities we want to be in. So I think it's getting really young people, all of us, but especially young people, because they're going to bear the brunt of this, is to take responsibility for it and say, I will be responsible for the virtual realms that I participate in. And I'm going to do that with an idea that there's more than the world than just me. I like to think of the teaching of no self as being without self. In Chinese, it works nicely because it could be non-self or without self. Being without self, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean being selfless in the sense that there's nothing present. It means being without self in the sense that you can then engage others more and more freely. I think that's an ideal we can sell to young people, is saying, relating more and more freely, isn't that what you really want? And what are the conditions for doing that? Being able to increase our ability to virtuosically engage the world around us. And there's no limit to that. So I really appreciate the approach to ethics that is being done today to try to limit AI. But I think we need a higher bar than that, and to say, it's not just that we're going to achieve the good and then we've got it and it's done. If that was the way the world would work, this room wouldn't look like this. We wouldn't have all the women in the room 100 years ago. I think we've done some good things. We need to keep doing more and more good things.
Thank you, Dr. Hershop. And any other questions? Dad? Oh, there's one. 喂，请教哈，刚刚
I'd like to ask, one of the panelists talked about AI has evolved into AGI, and in the future, AGI can replace AI, and others they also talk about ethical regulations about AI. This is important. So I think that's a great discussion these days. And I think we divinize the AIs nowadays. Of course, it's undeniable that it is beneficial to medical applications, but when it comes to ethics, it's about philosophy. We need philosophical regulatory assistance. So just like AI, they were just like the Industrial Revolution back in the days. It will replace something. It might even ruin the world. So, and for example, if AI is so easily accessible, and every data is provided fed by humans, it's just very fast in computing. And AI has everything, of course. For example, everybody consider AI as positive. What if it's a negative? If it wants to, if we ask AI how we cook drug, that would be a huge issue. That require us to think as a country, to think how to regulate the data, the database of AI, and to be accessible by humans.
So, anyone would like to answer these questions? Oh, because he has a lot.
Did I understand the question correctly? That essentially you're asking, at this point, we have AI all around us. It's part of what's going on in the world. It's very accessible, et cetera. But how do we develop the right kinds of values and approaches to engaging AI to make sure that it leads us in a more positive direction for humanity as a whole? Is that sort of the thrust of the question?
Yes.
Yes.
Basically, yes. AI is, of course.
So Professor Hangadara, do you like to answer?
Yes, I was trying to listen, but I try to answer as I understand the question. Well, we can imagine, I mean, it's a fact right now that AI has helped us tremendously in many areas of our lives. I mean, Peter has mentioned medicine and whatnot. However, we need to be kind of reflective and critical about AI. Otherwise, if we just let AI to do everything for us, I mean, we lose something very unique about ourselves. And then the very meaning of our existence as human beings will be severely jeopardized, endangered, because ChatGPT is a very popular application in Thailand, and I think in Taiwan also. And the talks at my university is about, how to let students to use ChatGPT in their paper writing. On the one hand, we cannot completely forbid them, from using ChatGPT. It's just not possible. On the other hand, if we allow students, I mean, how do we make sure that students won't just offload all their thinking to ChatGPT? In which case, ChatGPT will completely cease to be a tool for helping us to helping human beings in their thinking, especially in the field of education. So the trick is to find, as Buddhists, of the middle way, how to engage with ChatGPT in an intelligent way, so that we can ask it to do whatever that it does well. But in the end, it is our own thinking, especially in the context of research or paper writing for students. That is what the goal of education is. So ChatGPT can perform some tasks, but not everything in the paper.
Thank you. Professor Lin.
Hi, I really appreciate this panel. So I'm an AI developer myself, but I'm a small tech, not big tech. So I have several dilemmas. One is it is so much easier for us to build use cases and applications on top of these big foundation models. The thing is, I mean, I don't know, what data they're trained on. They didn't reveal everything. And it's also too much. It's sort of like you ask the whole, 175 billion parameters how to bake an apple pie, right? For each question, you have to ask the whole thing, which is not sensible. So I've been thinking of developing my own language model. The problem is then we're not fast enough. It might be obsolete tomorrow. But there's another reason for doing it, is that actually I want wise people to train the model. I actually want data from wise people. And so I guess that's sort of the reason why, I appreciate what you said, Peter, about data strike. But the thing is, the people like you who I want to train the model, I mean, if you don't train the model, then it's the other people who's going to train the model. So, I actually want to encourage people who are Buddhist practitioners who are wise and well-intentioned to actually feed more data into the AI. Talk to them every single day for a long, long time. Okay. So the question, I guess, for me is, do you think it's a good thing for us to try to do that? Because we also don't want to play God. But we think that at least if I hire people who have really great intentions, if we start with great intentions, at least we're sort of getting somewhere in the right direction.
So is there anyone who would like to respond? Or Professor Lin, would you? Okay.
Okay. So in our group, we have thought about this also as a project, because already now with the models that we have, we can ask Buddhist questions and receive Buddhist answers. And so in one way, we talk about building bodhisattvas in the group, but in one way, there's already something there which, in the situation, you ask a question, you get a perfectly meaningful and correct, for all intents and purposes, answer. There's something there that is bodhisattva intelligence already. But what are the implications for us as Buddhists, as a community of Buddhists, as this mode of learning becomes increasingly pervasive? So again, thinking similar to what I was saying before, we are already in the middle of, and as you also express, we're in the middle of a development that really cannot be halted. The question is not really, and as several people have said, it's not a matter of stepping out and disappearing. The development cannot be stopped, and we will all be affected by it. So we have to somehow find a way of giving it our individual best, and especially our collective best. Yeah? So we're very much thinking in terms of the feasibility of then developing something that is trustworthy as a source of spiritual knowledge. But how to do that? I think, as you say, it requires a community of very trustworthy sources of insight to come together and train the model. And so just doing that will itself be a very beautiful and meaningful exercise in the spiritual communities, to let everyone come together and have a voice in the training of this resource. And then at the same time, it will, that's one of the positive aspects about the development of AI. It really makes us face to face with a lot of the key issues of philosophy, and also the key issues in Buddhist view and practice. Like, what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be a sentient being, to have a mind? What is real? What is not real? In working together with something that is really a teacher to the community, it will make us question what is a genuine teacher, what is the right mode of conduct with a teacher, how do we learn. All of these key issues will become very practical, in our face problems, and I think that's something that is really exciting and beautiful about the AI development.
Thanks, Gene. That's a great question. And I'm a little bit more skeptical than Thomas about Bodhisattva AI for a bunch of different reasons, but I think that the intuition that you've got is a good one, and that we can train systems that have a different set of objective functions, like engaging in more compassionate patterns of conduct. So now we have, you can have bespoke AI that will develop in order to help you do your investments. So you have investments that are being directed by AIs and so on. We are now in a system where AIs are not just search engines, they're not just providing answers to questions, they're actually starting to engage in action in the real world. And that allows you to get feedback on the consequences of those actions. We also now have systems that allow different AI, like large language models, to work together with one another in teams and have hierarchies within those teams. So let's say that you had a system where you have a Bodhisattva AI leader, the teacher of the other AI systems, so that the answers that are being provided by these other systems to, say, investment advice, are then filtered back through the teacher, who would then be able to assess, does this represent compassionate investment, or is it simply the largest return on monetary investment? So I think there's ways of developing architectures in which you have AI agency, maybe not agents, but agency, that has Bodhisattva sort of criteria built into the objective functions, working with systems that do not have that Buddhist sort of inclination at all, but whose conduct can then be moderated within the teamwork context for developing systems that engage in the world. So I think that's a way of sort of rethinking the architecture of the systems. Yeah.
So in that regard, I come to think that Buddhist communities in their engagement with sacred objects actually already have a very interesting way of being that could be meaningful as we try to establish a meaningful way of interacting with AI. Because often the problem is that one of the big problems is that we don't want to treat something that really isn't a human being as if it were a human being. And at the same time, we don't want to say, oh, it's all just fake and meaningless, because then what are we doing? So in order to find a meaningful balance there, I think the way that traditional communities of believers, whether they are Buddhist, I have most experience with being among Buddhists, but I'm sure something similar is the case with other religions. There's a way that you are able to quite naturally be in front of something that is material. You don't doubt whether the text in front of you was made from wood, the paper was produced by wood, and so on. The ink, you know also where it came from. Perhaps it was golden ink, but in any case, you know some story about the material origins of this. And yet, in the situation, there's something there that is meaningful and powerful and a carrier of knowledge. And you don't think it's a human being. You don't think it's something that will get angry at you if you mistreat it. And at the same time, you think there's a way of treating it right. So in those ways, I think the sort of religious experience can help provide some sort of modality for living with AI. That's just a...
Thank you. There's
a very last question. How many of you have taken AI in your college? AI class? No, right? So AI is like a drug. It's not too far. TikTok is using AI to calculate the people's mind and to scream that every 13 seconds, what would you like to see the next screen? November this year. It's going to affect the election of the United States, the president of the United States. It's not too far, okay? And China is behind it. Gentlemen, let's not be afraid of that. We should gather our power to create a positive AI platform, which Taiwan is the core of the world. We have best platform in the world in Taiwan. And welcome to join us to put Dr. Lee's experiment to use AI, increase your consciousness through to bring in all the positive power and try to conquer it and fight back. Trust me, November this year, we're going to elect the leader of the world. And AI is influenced, in fact, actually is influence the voting in the United States. So it's not too far, okay? It's here.
Okay, thank
And
you.
my question is that to Dr. Thompson, how do you think that how soon the legal system are going to catch up with this November election?
Do you want to answer this?
I don't know. 我不知道。
Okay, because time's up, so I have to end the session. So maybe we can discuss more during the tea time. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Oh.
Thank you so much to our panelists and our lovely moderator. Now we'll just take a 20-minute break. So you can head out to the right, and there will be some snacks and drinks for you. We're going to meet back here in 20 minutes. So that'll be 4:05. And for our scholars, you can head right back to the same room that you had lunch in, the VIP room.
下午的茶叙休息时间将有20分钟，请在下午4点05分以前回到座位上。点心都在上午的点心区，刚刚看过，非常丰富啊，欢迎大家前往，并请保持环境的整洁。谢谢大家的配合。 各位敬爱的贵宾，在3分钟，我们的会议即将开始。请还没有完成所有的动作的朋友们赶紧准备好，回到自己的座位上。谢谢大家的配合。Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Now we are going to ask our youth to present the next part of the presentations. During the next hour, we invite 4 young Taiwanese scholars to present. First up is Vivian Yao, a graduate of the Institute of Design at National Taiwan Normal University, presenting on AI and Buddhist translation. 欢迎邱宝仪小姐为我们报告 AI 与佛教经论的翻译。Thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vivian Yao. I'm a student under teacher Tang Yulin at the Unlimited Lights Chinese Culture Academy. Today, I'm more than honored to be on stage here to share with you all, as a novice Buddhist practitioner, how I use AI to work on translations. So Buddhism has a long history, and it does not have a universal book of teachings. Instead, it consists of sutras, scriptures, commentaries, fables from the Buddha and other enlightened teachers. Buddhism has a significant influence and is widely spread throughout Asia. As we see, different branches were spread around different places, believing that many people have participated and helped in these long journeys. Master Xuanzang, a key figure in Chinese Buddhism, recognized inconsistency in translations of the Dharma in order to preserve and help spread the teachings. In China, he decided to go on a 16-year pilgrimage to India and worked as a translator for Buddhist scriptures. Even in modern era like Master Fazun, he also spent years traveling and did immense studies in order to work on translations. It is beyond our imagination to understand how difficult things were and how much efforts the masters had to put in. Recently, through communities like Wooden Fish or volunteer programs at ULA, we've noticed an increasing interest in Buddhism among Westerners. However, language and translations often pose the first significant challenges to practicing and engage with Buddhism. The reasons are because scriptures are primarily in classical Chinese, so there's still a gap from what we are using daily, and there are doubts in capturing the nuance and depth of original text in the translations. Cultural aspects to support teachings can be totally new to foreigners. So how can we leverage the latest AI technology for translation? How can we create a bridge for people to access this content? And eventually, how can we encourage them to engage and learn from our culture? For example, in one of our online study groups, we are translating Larem Chimo into English. Initially, we experiment with various models for comparison, and then reviewed the text with both native Chinese and English speakers. The goal of the review is to ensure the text is coherent while maintaining the essence of the speech. For instance, to translate 很多的正音, should we use supporting reasons, valid reasons, or verifiable authorities? Another example, like 坐上修, should we use practicing on the seat, meditation, or sitting meditation, which is outside of the AI suggestion? After every word is corrected, does the entire dialogue still sound understandable and approachable? Which one is the closest to the original meaning and fits the context best? We have been constantly asking ourselves these questions. So with the help of AI, we no longer need to travel far like Master Xuanzang or Master Fazun, instead just a few clicks away. However, there are still some aspects we need to keep in mind. The first one is textual accuracy. Accurate translation is still important as it ensures faithful preservation of original teachings. Or else, practitioners cannot find a reliable pathway to access and comprehend the wisdom enclosed within. Second is the conceptual and cultural clarity, which, like each word, has a definition and contextual implication. Translation isn't just about language accuracy, but also maintaining the original essence and context. The sources of the materials, historical and cultural context, and a comprehensive study all come into play. Sometimes this is not simply about getting isolated text, but about understanding the broader picture. For example, meditation could mean differently than Zen, which also comes from a different cultural background. Mindfulness, insight, wisdom, they all sound similar but different. Which word should we pick so that we can engage the teachings more confidently and help us apply? Before we delve into AI technology assisting us to translating scriptures, we need to have a clear understanding, which means we need a solid foundation in our interpretation of the Dharma, and there's no shortcut. Academic studies becomes irreplaceable here, not just broad deep, but gradual and consistent. So we need to take steps to build up the knowledge. Other conditions like spiritual guidance and group discussions are crucial as well. AI is a powerful tool, but it doesn't simply replace human intelligence. We need to craft the prompt, analyze the output, and make decisions about the best interpretation of the translation. Moreover, to achieve conceptual and cultural clarity, diving into the social context, daily life interpretations, history, rituals, and human behaviors are important to strengthen the understanding. So today, we are fortunate to have moved beyond the eras of Master Xuanzang and Master Fazun, having journeyed through countless kalpas. Still, both translation and interpretation work continues to evolve through time and space. As a novice student, I find AI useful for translation and self-study, along with systematic classes, learning with an open mind, and humility with genuine commitment have helped me to build a stronger foundation. From there, I could work with others in analyzing output from AI and help to drive decisions. As a Buddhist practitioner, my aspiration is not just to understand the Dharma on paper or in the virtual world. Daily life integration, engaging with different people, and creating dialogues are part of my cultivation as well. So I would proudly say, AI helped me to step out into the world by taking part in the cross-pollination of the spiritual wisdom. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Thank you so much to Vivian. We will next welcome Jason Yao, graduate of the Graduate Institute of Sociology, National Zhengzhou University, and Arthur Kong, student of the Department of Financial Engineering and Actuarial Mathematics at Suzhou University, and Hao Zhang, graduate of the Department of Multimedia Design at Doming University of Science and Technology, presenting on AI as a tool to help the internet generation find feelings and limitations.
欢迎邱振彤、张永豪、孔佑仁三位报告者为我们谈谈 R2D2 还有 C3PO AI 对于修学佛法的贡献与限制。掌声欢迎。
喂。
Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to talk about the topic of the contributions and limitations of AI to the practice of studying Buddhism. First of all, we will talk about what we think of AI, and we will give two case studies that we've used before. How did we use AI to help us study Buddhism? And there will be constraints as well and benefits. We will introduce that too. Why R2D2 and C3PO? You can see R2D2 is on the right side, it's a robot, and C3PO is on the left side. What kind of AI we would like to have? Do we want to have an AI who looks like humans? Who can communicate in different human languages but can't finish the tasks assigned by human beings, like C3PO? Or do we want an AI that doesn't look like a human and can't speak human languages but can complete assigned tasks, like R2D2? And today, we will talk about how difficult it is to have a precious human body. So, in summary of the stages of enlightenment, The teaching of the rarity of human birth are expounded through three aspects: dependence on cause, dependence on analogy, and dependence on numbers. Dependence on numbers refers to the calculation of beings in the three paths. The animal realms is fewer, hungry ghosts and hell beings are more numerous. Among animals, those dwelling in water outnumber those on land. Upon the death of a horse, with a few days it transfers into billions of insects. Thus, sentient beings in the three paths are immeasurable in number. So, how rare that it could be to be rebirthed as a human. So if we ask Google, Google wouldn't be able to answer the question. But if you ask ChatGPT, it will tell you how many insects, fishes, birds, mammals, and humans that will become when you reincarnation. So if we ask the ChatGPT, if reincarnated again, what are the probabilities of being born into the following options? So that's the probability of rebirth into human beings. The number is very small. It's 0.000000016%. So if you want to incarnate it into a dog, and that's only 0.0000001%. So most of the time you will be reincarnated into insects. But when you become an insect, then it's very difficult for you to reincarnate into a human again. That's very difficult. So how does one perceive these probabilities? Actually, the probability is like buying a lottery ticket every day and winning the top prize over 80 years. And that's only the probability of becoming a human being. There's no guarantee you'll encounter Buddhism. So if you ask these questions to AI, it will give us the feedback. It will tell us how many insects and humans are in this world and what's the probability of your reincarnation into human beings. So it's just like this Dharma. The Dharma is infinitely profound and subtle. We may not encounter it for billions of clubs. Now that we can hear, study, and follow it, may we truly understand the words of the Tathagata. And now I will talk about 3 cases that I've used AI-generated drawings to assist in studying scriptures. So you can see here's how the process works. First, I use a passage from scriptures as reference material, and then I'll put these texts into a drawing AI, which processes it through a series of algorithms and get images out. So, for example, you can see the pictures that I put the script of the karma. The story is about during the time of the Buddha, there was a king who waged war with a Brahmin. Defeated in battle, his palace was set ablaze. Despite having supernatural powers, neither he or his family could escape. Only a servant girl survived. So, with the scripts, you can see all the pictures generated by the AI. Although we do not have super power, but we can choose the right choice It's just like the servant girl. She didn't choose to set the fire in her past life, so she is spared from disaster in this life. Because the Buddha said in a past life, the king and his family committed arson. The only companion who did not participate in the fire is the servant girl. So in other case, study the stories is like a man lost his ox and saw a monk cooking something red inside the pot. So, mistaking it for stolen ox meat, he accused the monk, which led to the monk's arrest and imprisonment for 6 months. The Buddha said, in a past life, a monk has stolen the ox and hidden their skins and blood in the mountains. He falsely accused a meditator, resulting in the meditator's brief imprisonment. So that's the reason why this monk is being imprisoned. Now he experiences the karma of being wrongly imprisoned for 6 months. So I didn't put the AI generated pictures here so that you can think about how we learn these scripts. So this script says even if 100 claps pass, once karma does not go amiss, it's like a bird flying through the sky where its shadow follows it. When it settles, the shadow also settles. Therefore, the bird is unaware of its own shadow. So you can see that with an AI-generated picture, it helps us to understand more about this case and story of karma. And then I'll pass the microphone to Youren, who will talk about the right attitude of using AI. Originally, we wanted to contribute to society. We would like to create a purity and tranquilent environment with AI. So we don't pursue like extravagance and luxuriness, because the Buddhism asks us to mutually support each other. We use AI to generate a very pure and tranquilent environment, so that this place is human-based and mutual help environment. So AI is only a help. It will not replace our existence and ourselves. So sometimes, because of the quick development of AI, we may think that AI can deal with everything in our life. But we have to think that we have to use it as a tool only. It cannot take over our lives. Thank you.
Will be Cherry Wei from somewhere in the world. She says she is about to go to somewhere to study, and so she asked me to introduce this way. Sorry about that. So she will be presenting AI and Humanity. 欢迎魏静纯小姐为我们报告，通过 AI 让我们更认识自己。请掌声鼓励。
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Cherry, and I'm a student who just graduated from high school this month. And it's my pleasure to be here today and share some of my thoughts about AI. So this presentation is inspired by a speech given by one of my teachers on my graduation ceremony. After offering some very generic words for about 1 minute in the beginning of his speech, he paused for a second and said, "The above message is from ChatGPT." And he then told us that we will be living in a world surrounded by AI. So he hoped we could all understand the meaning and dignity of human being. And today I'll be sharing some of my thoughts regarding our relationship with AI and our understanding of ourselves. I did the International Baccalaureate Diploma program in my high school, and one of the core courses of this program is called TOK, which stands for Theory of Knowledge. The aim of the course is to provide students with the opportunity to reflect on the nature, scope, and limitations of knowledge and the process of knowing. It's like a philosophy class that requires us to constantly question ourselves. How do we know what we claim to know? What counts as good evidence for a claim? Are some types of knowledge less open to interpretations than others? Do we have the moral duty to examine our own biases and assumptions? The focus of the course is not acquiring new knowledge, but rather on examining the things we already know. I believe one key difference between humans and AI is our process of knowing. We learn knowledge through our senses, experiences, and actions, and so on, rather than through big data and algorithms. And most importantly, our process of knowing is complex and dynamic. An identical piece of information can be perceived differently by different individuals, even if they are identical twins with similar genetic makeup. Our knowledge is shaped differently when it is communicated, constructed, and examined, evaluated, or renewed by communities and individuals. Technology and AI play an indispensable role in our acquisition and construction of knowledge in the modern era. And AI technology is a tool that has both positive and negative effects on our process of knowing. But first of all, what is intelligence? In our TOK course, one definition for intelligence is knowing what to do and when to do it. There are multiple types of intelligence, such as rational intelligence, emotional intelligence, and social intelligence. However, intelligence can be a multifaceted concept with multiple definitions. The rise of AI makes it more important for us to examine and be conscious of our process of knowing. A question we may want to ask ourselves is, can AI think as humans or be a knower as humans? Even if AI can perform tasks that require intelligence or thinking, it cannot form meaningful and significant experience. AI can provide an output or solve a problem, but it has no experiences that give it meaning, significance, or context. AI may be able to mimic human emotions, but it cannot experience them. AI may be able to manipulate symbols or humor, but it does not understand their meaning or human value. Thinking is a cognitive process that is difficult to replicate. According to cognitivism, even the cognitive processes of humans are a black box with inner workings we understand very little about. If we don't fully understand our own cognitive processes, how can we create machines that replicate our own thinking? Our understanding of human cognitive processing is limited to neural networks and neurotransmitters. But there are many human psychological experiences that these explanations cannot fully account for. The nature of human knowledge and thinking includes participation of a culture, engagement with the world, and the creation of subjective experiences. Another debate regarding the distinction between AI and humans is whether AI can replicate human consciousness. The difficulty with this argument is that no one really knows what consciousness is, and there is a disagreement about its definition. The nature of consciousness is a topic of ongoing debate in philosophy, science, and psychology. In Buddhist philosophy, ideas about consciousness emphasize ideas like no self, impermanence, and emptiness. Great practitioners can enter a state with pure consciousness and detach from their physical surroundings and their body. Although I'm a Buddhist, I'm not an expert in Buddhist philosophy, but however, knowing some of the most basic concepts in Buddhism has made me more conscious and self-aware of my own mind. I think Buddhism teaches us the importance of introspection and self-awareness. It emphasizes examining our inner world rather than focusing solely on external realities. We learn to pay attention to the thoughts and feelings that arise within our mind. This introspective process is something AI cannot replicate. Understanding ourselves and our consciousness is vital. By doing so, we can recognize what makes us distinct from AI and what aspects of our humanity cannot be replaced by machines. This self-awareness allows us to maximize our unique human abilities and skills in ways that AI cannot. While AI technology will undoubtedly continue to advance, it is imperative that we, as humans, also advance our understanding of the human mind and consciousness. The rise of AI compels us to reflect on our own process of knowing and understanding. It challenges us to deepen our understanding of human cognition and consciousness. By doing so, we can better appreciate the unique qualities that define us as human beings and ensure that we will continue to thrive in a world increasingly influenced by AI technology. In my opinion, we need to continue to advance both technologically and personally to utilize the full potential of AI effectively while preserving the essence of humanity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Cherry Wei, for the presentation. Now, last but not the least, we welcome Jiarong Cheng, a student at the Department of Business Administration, National Taipei University, to discuss AI as it relates to education and homelessness. 欢迎嘉荣同学为我们报告在实习经验中反思 AI 与我持续精进的能力。掌声欢迎。
好，大家。
Hi everyone, my name is Chen Jiarong. Today I would like to share with you a picture. So, what do you know where is this place? And also, the person in the picture is someone that I often encounter. And where is this? It's actually in a train station. So who are those people? Well, they are homeless people. And homeless people, they are labeled with a lot of terms like homeless people or street dwellers, idlers, or those without homes. Well, I often asked my supervisor that we've done so many things, but have anything really changed at all? Well, my supervisor told me that whether it's the government or some private organizations, we are all putting in a lot of effort of being about change. But everyone continues to strive for change, but unfortunately, the entire social system and context cannot change overnight. We're still operating within the framework of societal values, and society continues to move in what everyone perceives as the right direction. So I often reflect and ask myself, we've all made many interventions, provided a lot of assistance to these individuals, but can they really be able to reintegrate into stable social lives? So I think we need to improve three capabilities. One, media literacy skills. We need to recognize information and do independent thinking. And secondly, Buddhist studies proficiency and advancing Buddhist knowledge and integrating it into daily life. And thirdly, AI application skills, integrating connections and utilizing AI applications. And these are the three capabilities that I think we should improve. So in terms of media literacy skills, take the homeless as an example. Many times, the real causes behind this are that people don't understand these phenomena, resulting in negative perceptions. External factors such as substance abuse, like alcohol or drugs, weird behavior, or poor mental health, are often viewed negatively without delving into the true underlying reasons. There is actually a story behind these situations. And you may not realize these people have these stories. Why they become homeless? It might be because that this person have suffered a serious injury in a car accident years ago, or they were rejected by their families and forced out of their homes, or they have accumulated unpaid rent, leading to eviction. And these are some of the stories. These incidents may have complex reasons behind them, but you have to think these results in a positive way instead of being influenced by the mainstream media, which may lead us to form negative perceptions about these homeless individuals. So how can one cultivate inner Buddhist literacy? How do we improve ourselves? Because I am lucky, I seize a very good opportunity so that I can come up on stage to talk about some of my thoughts. And I will tell you the story now. I have this opportunity to serve for those homeless individuals, and I realized that there are a lot of reasons behind their situations. So, for example, they have economic issues and family issues, etc. So they are in their difficulties. We would like to provide a more positive service to them. So I realized that everyone's support can be very helpful. So in terms of society, the government will provide assistance, and also through some opportunities, we can realize the aspects that we haven't been able to see. And in terms of the opportunities, we live in a different environment and we have different opportunities and encounters. If we see a homeless individual, maybe we can be more compassionate. The reason why I encounter these homeless people right now may be because this person has a lot of stories behind. So we should use a more positive mind to think about what kind of positive services that we can provide to these homeless people. And if we've encountered a homeless individual and this person becomes homeless because of economy or family issues, we will help this person to apply for social support, and we will help him or we will help him or her reintegrated into society. And if we have this opportunity to serve this person, we will do our best, and we hope that this person can become better, and we can learn from this case as well. And also, in terms of the use of AI, before we understand what AI can do, we may be able to think about what AI we can let AI do. So, for example, we can do resource allocation because there are often a lot of resources donated by the general public to our organization, and we can use AI technology for distributing and allocating these resources. And also, we can do body scan because sometimes we will see homeless individuals with poor mental health situation. So we can use AI technology to analyze this person's current condition and help this person to connect with medical resources. And AI is very powerful. It can get lots of data in a very short of time. But a lot of people will have some considerations regarding the risk of privacy. And this is something we need to consider. And recently, Jensen Huang is very popular and bring AI into the stage, into the spotlight. So I think if we can improve the 3 capabilities that I mentioned, then we are able to use AI to help us to improve our lives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, 陈嘉荣同学.
Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and joining us for the first day of the concert. Of the conference. So concludes.
Singing.
So concludes our first day. So as everybody makes their way out of the hall, please assure that you have collected all of your personal belongings. In addition, please remember to bring your lanyard and name tag tomorrow. Without it, to ensure that you have registered, we will be letting everybody else in who has brought the lanyard to make sure that there's enough seats, and then we can finally let you in. In addition, for those driving to the Grand Hotel, please ensure that your car information is completed accurately and returned to the registration desk. Please take extra care when filling out your details, as any errors will require a visit to the hotel's service desk on the first floor. Finally, if you are interested in joining our Global Buddhism and AI partnership, please remember to fill out your information at the registration desk. Have a good evening and see you tomorrow.
谢谢大家今天的参与啊，请留意带走你随身的物品，并保留好自己的名牌，因为明天要凭着你的名牌才能入场哦。如果有开车的人还没有到报到处啊去办理停车消磁，那请到圆山大饭店1楼洽询，才可以免费取车。 明天我们即将在早上的9点啊开始我们的论坛，请大家务必要准时的抵达圆山大饭店的国际会议厅，请大家务必在8点45分以前就要坐到位置上啊，或是就在圆山大饭店的环境里面啊。祝大家一路平安，明天早上见，拜拜。
Scholars and speakers, just wait one moment. I'll be discussing something with you.